Good afternoon. Welcome back to the Deep 404. Kremenchug Airport in Ukraine has been struck reportedly by a large missile attack coordinated by the Russians. This appears to be in retaliation to the Ukrainian Storm Shadow cruise missile attack on the Black Sea Fleet headquarters that happened yesterday. Turkish sources are indicating that Kremenchug Airport was the launch site for the Storm Shadow or SCALP cruise missiles that targeted Crimea and Sevastopol, hitting the headquarters of the Black Sea Fleet. And this may be a reciprocal attack for that. There is reports that there may have been KH-50 missiles used here. Now, I can't confirm that, but the KH-50 missile is a very special new piece of the Russian armament. Their KH range of missiles, the KH-101s and KH-55s, they have some challenges. They're heavy. They need to be hauled up into the air to be launched by big bombers. The heat signatures of those bombers, which once they get into the air, give a heap of warning to, well, in this case, the Ukrainians or whoever the enemy of the Russians might be that they're launching these against. So once those bombers start taxiing, getting ready to get up into the air, it's pretty easy for them to be detected by Russian satellite and that sort of thing. So this gives hours of warning to the Ukrainians. Now, again, sort of some early reporting about this, but what's coming out from some of the Telegram channels is that it was KH-50s that were used. Now, these are, as I say, a recent addition to Russia's arsenal. They have an estimated range of over 1,500 kilometres, a cruising speed of 700 kilometres an hour with a max speed of just under Mach 1 at 950 kilometres per hour. They are reported to have a warhead weighing 450 kilograms. So they're new and advanced. They're hard to detect. They've got composite airframes for a reduced radar signature. They're stealth by design with a flattened cross-section and faceted sides, which again optimizes them for low radar cross-section. They're smaller than some of the other KH missiles in size overall. They have defensive suite and evasion capabilities built into them, including electronic warfare systems and flare heat traps, all these sort of things, to allow them to get through air defense without being attacked. Low flight altitude, so they're shaped for low altitude flight, meaning they can effectively hug the surface of the Earth with their advanced navigation and terrain tracking, keeping them very low, keeping them under radar. And so they turn up on the scene before you even know they're there. Apparently, there wasn't air defence triggered in this attack today on the Kremenchug Airport, and for that reason, I think this is why people are thinking these may have been KH-50s. Reports are that at the airfield, and we might just go on the map here, you can see the map there. This is Kremenchug Airfield here. It's just to the northwest of Dnipro, up to the northwest of Zaporozhye region. And if we let's just zoom in a little bit here, and you can get an idea for the layout of the airfield. You can see this large circular area here and these other areas off to the sides where they have obviously parking bays for aircraft. So reports are that the attack on this airfield targeted stocks of Storm Shadow and SCALP missiles and the Su-24M bombers that have been retrofitted, capable of carrying Storm Shadows and SCALPs, and were responsible for the attack yesterday on the Black Sea Fleet headquarters. If the reporting is correct, now this I can't corroborate this stuff, it's just new, but if it is correct, they are suggesting that there are some significant casualties, again due to the fact that this that this attack was not, there didn't seem to be an awareness or an early awareness for the Ukrainians that this attack was happening, but there are casualties reportedly possibly among pilots, air crew, airfield staff, and even NATO personnel. Now, what their roles may be is not mentioned, but yes, claiming that even NATO personnel involved. Anyhow, I'm sure more will come out about that one soon. Now, there are some stories, interesting posts today on a Ukrainian Telegram channel, Legitimy. Legitimy is a Ukrainian channel. They're sometimes not overly friendly in their reporting to the Ukrainian leadership, but they are a pro-Ukrainian channel. And I've found them to be generally reliable in what they're reporting. And I just wanted to talk through some of the things that they're mentioning today. Now, one of the topics here, they're reporting that the Ukrainians are having problems repairing their aircraft. They're having a hard time finding spare parts for the Soviet-era aircraft. So at this stage, the Ukrainians are using Soviet-era aircraft, Su-25s, Su-24s, that type of thing. There's a report of another Su-25 having been shot down yesterday. We're probably seeing on average, I'd say one and a half a week being reported being shot down. And the Ukrainians have got a problem in that they're not getting any supplies from Russia, of course, for spares to allow them to resolve issues. Now, jet aircraft are notorious for their maintenance requirements. Helicopters are the same. So if they've got Soviet-era helicopters that they're using, same problems. Thousands of moving parts, lots of maintenance required. If you can't get spare parts, you can get a piece of equipment grounded very quickly for what might be one minor piece. But if you can't get that piece, you can't get the thing in the air. So Legitimate Channel is saying that while the Ukrainians' partners are able to provide spares for things like tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, armoured personnel carriers, ground-based vehicles, even artillery, they're struggling to get spare parts for their air force. And this is part of the reason why the Ukrainians are looking to get F-16s and Western helicopters as quickly as they can. Because the belief is that with so many NATO nations flying F-16s, there will be a large supply of spare parts. So if they get F-16s into the conflict, they can keep them running, be able to maintain them over time. So that's one thing. Now, Legitimate Channel, they often talk about their sources within the Ukrainian government or within the office of the president within Ukraine. Now, again, I'm not there. I don't know who they are. I can't confirm if they really do have sources, but they do seem to have sometimes quite timely and accurate reporting. So I've got no reason to disbelieve that that's where they're getting their information from as opposed to any other source when they're getting it right. They talk a little bit about President Zelensky and some things that he has promised and some of the problems he's had over the last week. So the problem with the Polish Prime Minister Morawiecki, he has reportedly further come out and said, I'll quote, "I want to tell President Zelensky to never again insult Poles as he did recently." Now, this is related to President Zelensky's comments at a UN meeting last week, where he said that some of the UN partners, some of the NATO partners are just really playing their role to be concerned, but actually they're setting the stage for Moscow for a Russian actor. This came out, it seems, in response to Poland, Hungary and Slovakia ignoring a European Commission request that they go back to purchasing Ukrainian grain. The UN had put a ban on member nations having to purchase Ukrainian grain because there had been complaints from Slovakia and Hungary, Bulgaria and Poland that the price of the Ukrainian grain being forced upon them was so low that it was impacting their domestic production. Their farmers were suffering, and so they said, nope, we're not buying any more of this. That ban ended last Friday. and an announcement was made that those nations would go back to purchasing. So as I said, Bulgaria, Poland, Hungary and Slovakia have said, no, we're not doing it. Now, after that, Zelensky came out quite heatedly, accusing these nations of not of effectively being friendly with Russia. This then, it led to, or at least became the excuse for the Polish Prime Minister to say, we are no longer supplying weapons to Ukraine. Now, he went on to say that, look, our current situation will remain the same, but that was after he'd said, we're no longer going to supply weapons to you. So I think perhaps the current situation remaining the same relates to what weapons you've got are still there, but no new ones. Now, there's reports today that the United States have asked for an explanation of that comment from the Polish Prime Minister. So I'm getting the feeling that it is a legitimate comment that he has made and demonstrates a Polish position. Legitimacy again talks about a recent poll done in Poland, which is indicating that up to 80% of Poles surveyed are now against supporting Kiev. Now, as we know, the Polish government has an election coming up relatively soon, and in that election they have a strong base of farmers is part of their support base. So if they're starting to get people, often the general public will support the farmers. They're smart enough to know that the farmers provide the food. Without food, they're in trouble. And so if the farmers start to complain, many other areas of the economy will often start to join them and support them. So if that is starting to happen, then that's one reason why this might be, why this grain's not being bought. But it also may be that the Polish people are just over supporting the war, something that they may well be realising is not going well for them. Now, they're also able to read the news and to jump on Telegram, and they're far closer to the action than many of us are. And so I think many of them will have the picture of what is really going on the ground there. They go on to talk about some of the other challenges. So Zelensky reportedly promised to the US to return Soledar, Bakhmut, and to take Tokmak. Now, the first two, Soledar and Bakhmut being symbolic victories, if they had been able to claim then. Bakhmut, the symbolism there that if it was chosen, it would be shown that Ukraine was taking the fort back. He could actually go back and justify all those statements he'd made before where he said, we'll never let Bakhmut fall into enemy hands. It'll always be Ukrainian. If they could have taken Bakhmut, they would have been able to say, look, we've kept our word on that one. It would also indicate a strong sign of a reversal of the trend of the Russian forces taking Ukrainian towns and positions. If they could have said, we've taken back Bakhmut, that really would have meant, okay, you've made some progress there. Reportedly, Bakhmut was chosen because there are no minefields there, or at least the depth and extent of the minefields there is not the same as it is around areas like Robotne. There was not considered to be a large strength of Russian forces in the area to support and protect Bakhmut. And again, because of the symbolism. Now, this failure to deliver any of these, Soledar, Bakhmut, or Tokmak, of course, being strategically important in the overall offensive plan of reaching the Sea of Azov, where the Ukrainians needed to get down through Orakov and down through Robotne and get to Tokmak, take Tokmak, then drive on to Melitopol, and then a little further to the Sea of Azov, and they would then have cut off Crimea. Now, because that hasn't happened, again, the Legitimacy channel is reporting that their inside contact is saying that the tone of the discussions in Washington has been around the fact that questions are now being raised about the funding, about where it has gone, where it has been spent, how it has been spent. The feeling is that the star time of Zelensky has passed. His star is fading, And now they are reporting that the US has issued to Zelensky some ultimatums. And these ultimatums are financial assistance, ongoing financial assistance from the US to Ukraine would be contingent upon elections being held. These elections would be held under US control and supervision and not under the office of the president. That's the Ukrainian office of the president. This is something which, again, causes a problem in the West. The West, which is always banging on about democracy, being the centre of democracy, the seat of that in the Western world, doesn't look very good when Volodymyr Zelensky says, oh, we're having a war now. We're not going to have any elections. We'll postpone them. A lot of people have felt that that is purely a power grab on his behalf because he knows that he won't win a democratic election if it's held. So this topic now, the US saying, if you want more funding, there will be an election, and guess what? We will run it. People are starting to suggest now that this means that they don't mind if he doesn't win. If he doesn't win, that's fine. They will put in who they want to put in. That idea, that concept is followed up by the second of the ultimatums, which is that they request a clearing out of certain staff. Ermak, Zelensky's primary advisor, apparently he has been tagged as someone to go. And there is also talk that the head of the Central Election Commission may be replaced by a Western-favoured person. They're also looking for reforms on corruption. Now, this democracy in the West, if you suddenly have an election which is not going to be held anymore, that looks bad. If the US can say, look, the Ukrainians, we've spoken to them and they're going to have an election, everything's okay. That helps the Biden administration make this whole Ukrainian thing smell better. Reforms on corruption. Now, there's so much talk in the West and the US at the moment about the corruption in the Ukraine, not only the corruption within Ukraine itself, but the corruption of the Biden family within the Ukraine. So again, to be able to now wave a flag and go, look, there's corruption reforms. Ukraine isn't corrupt like you say. These things are just smears against Joe Biden by the Republicans because he's going to win another election. But these are the things that are going to be enforced upon Zelensky if what Legitimacy is reporting is correct. Some couple of other ones. Powerful ultimatums. All future purchases for the army, this is the Ukrainian army, are to be through US channels like the CIA and not the UK MI5 and MI6. So it seems here that the US starting to realise their investment is going sour, like you will see in any business where there may be an investor who comes in early, gives some cash, listens to the CEO, thinks it's all going well. After a period of time, he's starting to ask, where's the return on my investment? And if that return isn't there, he steps in and starts to put some activities and people in place to make sure that they see the return on their investment. Sounds like that's what's happening here. The US, always been the largest funder of this war, is now starting to say, well, you're not going to be purchasing things from any other nations. If you want war equipment, you'll purchase from us. The last of the ultimatums mentioned, that full control and reporting, full control over and reporting on all future offensive and defensive plans will be given to the United States. So this is not really surprising, given that things haven't gone well in the offensive and given that the US is the major backer of Ukraine. But interesting now to have heard this coming out of a Ukrainian channel suggesting that this is the inside word of what is happening and just how bad things are going for Zelensky and his trip to Washington and to the UN in the last week. Now, perhaps what more unsettling news from the Legitimacy channel today is they are reporting that the Russian attacks on the Ukrainian infrastructure has started, that it's underway. Now, for a while, people have been suggesting that perhaps part of the reason that the Russians have not been launching such large missile strikes in some areas for a week or two was because they were starting to stockpile these for an attack on the Ukrainian energy infrastructure. What Legitimacy is reporting is that attacks are underway on oil reserves, ships, railways, power generation. They are advising Ukrainians to prepare for worst-case scenario, to stock up on water, firewood, food, batteries, candles, warm clothes, medicines, fuel, all the things that you might find necessary if the civil infrastructure were to fail you. So this is depressing news for the Ukrainian people if this is true, but this is not surprising. We've had a lot of indicators for a long while that this offensive, the last throw of the dice, was no good. It didn't work. There need to be repercussions for a failed offensive like that. If the Ukrainian leadership won't meet the Russian demands of demilitarization, denazification, and neutrality in terms of NATO, if they won't meet the Russians on those points, then the Russians will continue to grind and take charge in this conflict and dominate Ukraine. So, yes, not surprising that we're seeing this sort of thing here. Now, in some other news, in perhaps another hotspot popping up, and this has got perhaps a similar sort of background to what we've just been talking about around Nagorno-Karabakh in Azerbaijan, the conflict there between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which has just seemed to have, at least on paper, resolved itself, where the Armenian the Armenian Prime Minister, Pashin, has said that he recognises the Azerbaijan sovereignty over the Nagorno-Karabakh area. Now, this is a big move in this area. He's currently got protesters, both Russian supporting protesters and Western supporting protesters outside his Houses of Parliament, calling for his scalp, because they feel like he has just cut that region loose. And many people feel that what will happen now is, if not ethnic cleansing, then at least there will be a mass exodus of the Armenian ethnic inhabitants of the Nagorno-Karabakh area back to Armenia or other areas, and that just living in Azerbaijan won't work out for them, or, won't provide them with a safe place to live. We'll wait and see. There has been a request for UN observers to go in to observe what's going on. I noticed that Patrick Lancaster has travelled there and is reporting from the protests at this stage. So keep an eye out on Patrick's channel, Patrick Lancaster News Online, on YouTube and on the other social media channels. I think he's on Telegram as well, and on Rumble. Have a look there. But so something similar, it seems, to that is around Abkhazia in the Georgian region. The Republic of Abkhazia is a partially recognized state in the South Caucasus. It's on the eastern coast of the Black Sea, at the intersection of Eastern Europe and Western Asia. Its political status was the central issue of the Abkhaz-Georgian conflict and the Georgia-Russian relations. So while Abkhazia has been recognized as an independent state by Russia, the likes of Venezuela, Nicaragua, Syria, and the Georgian government and nearly all United Nations member states consider Abkhazia a sovereign territory of Georgia. So, Georgia, Abkhazia is a republic, was an autonomous republic for a period of time when still under the USSR, recognized by many as being the sovereign territory of Georgia, however recognized by Russia as being an independent state. It had autonomy with Soviet Georgia, at the time of the Soviet Union, when it began to disintegrate in the 80s. But there is tensions there which culminated in a war in 1992-93. And that resulted in Georgia's loss of control over most of Abkhazia and the ethnic cleansing of Georgians from Abkhazia. In August 2008, Abkhaz and Russian forces fought a war against the Georgian forces, which led to the formal recognition of Abkhazia by Russia. Now, what is happening here in this region is that the Georgian National Legion is reportedly lobbying to carry out a massive drone strike on infrastructure of Abkhazia. And the population there is about 245,000 people, and its largest city is Sukhumi. The Georgian National Legion are looking to overthrow the pro-Russian government in Georgia. This is reporting coming out today. Recently, allegedly, the Georgian intelligence forces announced that there was a coup d'etat being planned in that area. So here, what we're seeing is, again, Georgia, perhaps in much the same way as Azerbaijan, perhaps, has taken an opportunity to push in this Caucasus region, while Russia, who would normally hold hold the sway and hand over these areas, is busy and focused on Ukraine. Now, again, it's just recently, just this afternoon, that I've seen this reporting come out. I'll keep an eye on what's going on here to see what happens and to see if Georgia were to carry out drone strikes on Abkhazian's infrastructure, what the Russian response might be there. Look, anyhow, just a quick afternoon update after the brief one this morning as well. I hope you're having a good afternoon. I'm going to go and hang out with the family and some friends for the rest of the day. If you've made it this far watching this, thank you for watching it. I hope you're enjoying the channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.